All right, family, how we doing? You are tuning in to hang out with me and the substitute teacher. I know some of you are in Dr. King's class that's starting. Monique's over there in Dr. King's class. So I'm over here by myself covering the family meeting and hoping that I can get 9 people to watch this stream and talk to me while we do a few things. This is going to be a sort of, I don't know, freestyle. I don't really have a plan. I've been writing my dissertation all day, and I just kind of have been putting some things together here in the last 45 minutes. So we'll see what this is. So jump on the chat, tell me what you want to talk about, what you're hearing in the news, and maybe we will get that in the mix. Okay. So want to say get a shout out here to Future. I really wish I knew who you were. Email me, tell me who you are. Tell us about who you are, what your background is, what your POV is, how you found the ministry. Info at centerforbiblicalunity.com. And we've got some others watching us. Hartley's gonna stream us to the TV. All right, sounds good. All right. There's a few of us here. All right, let's get started. So, let's first do a wrap up on our conversation last week about DEI at the FAA, the whole plane crash situation in DC, and then the one in Philadelphia that kind of happened right before we went live last week. And again, I just want to say that our prayers go out to the families and those who died and all of the tragedy. And looking at this in an analytical way is not in any way indicative of our heart of our heart posture of compassion and care for those victims and all of that. But I do want to continue to process with all of you the backlash that's happening right now with diversity, equity, and inclusion, also called DEI. And we are continuing to get people asking us privately, do you think DEI is going away? What's happening with it? We keep saying probably not. It's just biding its time and shape shifting. This is our theory. We'll see how it plays out. But last week on the stream, we talked about Trump's remarks that DEI may have played a role in the crash. We still don't know that at this point. They did finally release the identity of the helicopter pilot. She was a young gal. I think she was like 28 years old, and she worked at the Biden White House for the last 3 years. And really, I just think about it from a mom perspective of a 28-year-old. It's really, really young. So anyways, don't construe anything that I'm going to say here as us saying DEI was directly responsible for the crash. That is not the purpose of this conversation. We are just trying to think about issues related to DEI and some very real things that have happened at the FAA that sparked President Trump's comments and what is behind those. So, and I appreciate that those of you who are encouraging others to give a thumbs up in the chat, that'll really help push this out a little bit more so we can get a few more people on here and talking about these very important issues. I appreciate that. So last week we had a commenter from a follower of the ministry who also has done work for the NTSB, the organization that often investigates plane crashes, and this person has participated in some investigations of plane crashes, and he had messaged us in the chat a link to this article. Unfortunately, my streaming software does not allow me to click on links when we're live, so I wasn't able to click on it, but I did want to circle back to the topic really quick and just give you kind of an update here. Um, so the headline here, and this is from Yahoo News: DEI cost me my job in aviation. A crash was inevitable. And this is a reprint of a news article from the Telegraph talking about a young man named Andrew Brigida, age 45 or 35, I'm sorry, who scored 100% in his training exam, but he alleged that he was denied a position in an air traffic control tower because of FAA recruitment process favored which favored diverse candidates. And he now is part of a class action lawsuit with people on this issue. Okay, our phone never rings, and it's ringing right now. The last time I answered the phone, it was a really scary person. So I'm not going to answer the phone. It's going to go to voicemail. But this is what the commenter last week was wanting to draw our attention to, was this class action lawsuit. And it's very interesting. This commenter followed up with this post to a legal foundation, Mountain States Legal Foundation. And I wanted to just read through this case summary really quick. The Obama administration dropped a skill-based system for selecting and hiring air traffic controllers and replaced it with a new system designed to favor applicants on the basis of their race. This is illegal and unconstitutional. The FAA purged its system of thousands of previously qualified, ready-to-hire applicants simply because they did not fit the right biographical profile. The government endangered public safety and owes restitution for this grave injustice. And this is part of the class action lawsuit that was mentioned in the Yahoo News or the Telegraph article. And this is kind of concerning. And this does lend some credibility to Trump's concern about trying to reverse these policies and saying, we're going to hire the most skilled people. We are not going to do it this way anymore. Now, again, we don't know if these hiring practices had any impact directly on this particular crash that happened last week in Washington, D.C. We don't know that. So we don't want to get out over our skis on this issue. But there is some merit to the concern here that, you know, when you get in a plane, you want to be assured I have a good pilot. I have an experienced pilot. And that I have somebody with good training and experience and is truly qualified for this job. And so this class action lawsuit is, here's the background. I'm going to share this with you guys. Going back to this legal summary. Here's the background on the case. The original lawsuit, Brigida versus FAA, was prompted by the FAA's 2013 decision to abandon its longtime hiring practice, which relied on a network of university-sponsored collegiate training initiative programs in cooperation with the FAA since 1991 to train and test future air traffic controllers. So again, this was a change in policy that happened during the Obama administration. Now, Trump claims that he rolled back some of this during his first term, but then Biden reenacted those policies. And so they would base their hiring on something called a biographical questionnaire designed to screen out candidates who weren't members of a preferred minority racial group. That's the key part. And so what happened was that qualified candidates, if you had air traffic control experience, when you took this biographical questionnaire, you were given a very low score. That question might be like, I think it was 0 points is what I read. But if you were part of a preferred um, racial group, then you got a high score. Maybe that was worth 25 points or 50 points or however they scored it. And so this is the basis for the class action lawsuit. And this is concerning. This is very concerning. So this is the foundation of the Trump's comments. I want to read a little excerpt from a letter that we got from an African American follower who's also a pilot and has been an instructor at one of these programs, training programs for college students. And I thought this was such a great insight because it's a real world example of this policy change. As someone with aviation experience, this person has experience in the Air Force, a master's degree in aeronautics, and has taught in an aviation program. And this person says that in their years as an aviation professor, now this person was teaching about 15 years ago, I saw firsthand what the Obama administration did with the air traffic controller recruiting and qualifications and testing. And I knew at that time that the system would become degraded. The mantra was that there are, quote unquote, too many whites in air traffic control. Prior to that change in the Obama administration, any blacks who wanted to be pilots and controllers have qualified and achieved such status on their own merit. So if I'm reading into this, if you see a black pilot on your airplane, and he looks like he's an older black man, he was probably um, got his training prior to this change in 2013 under the Obama administration. And the writer says, I was one of those people. I also have administered qualification tests to Black candidates who did not have testing standards compromised. They qualified like everyone else. In other words, there was one standard. Everyone had to pass the test. Everyone had the same standard. There was no preferential treatment given based on ethnicity. And this is what is, we think at the Center for Biblical Unity, the right way to go, that there should be one standard, equal weights and measures for all, and we want to hire the most qualified candidates. This, again, I'm reading from a letter that we got to the ministry, and this person wanted to remain anonymous, but this is an African American pilot who was an instructor prior to the changes implemented under the Obama administration. And this person says, I actually saw and see the onset of DEI in aviation as an insult to those of us blacks who actually chose to pursue the aviation profession, and the rush to reach ethnic quotas. This is a fool's errand. It is not necessary, and it can be deadly. And I would agree. And this person qualified for their job. They took the tests. They did what they had to do, and that's how it should be. I see that Kevin's on the stream. Kevin, if you want to um, jump in, if I don't know what you're doing, but if you do want to jump in on the conversation, I'll send you a link and you can jump in since I'm by myself today and talk about DEI foolishness. So yeah, so that was just kind of a wrap up from the conversation yesterday, but that got me thinking, and I couldn't find the clip back. That's why I was a little late getting on the stream. So I was trying to find this clip that I had seen earlier in the week where I believe it was a congressperson, someone in government, who was giving a speech and saying that merit-based hiring is a cover story for white supremacy. And I thought that's an interesting way of thinking about it, because you're going to see a lot of people in the public space concerned about the collapse of DEI. And you might be wondering, why are people screaming about this on television? What is happening? What are they thinking? And I want to try to give you some insight into what are they thinking, and their concern, especially if they're a minority person, is that they're afraid they're going to have no shot at good jobs, and that all of the rhetoric around merit-based hiring is just a cover story for white supremacy. Now, like the writer who wrote Into the Ministry, this person went through their training, before the changes implemented and the racial preferences that were implemented under the Obama administration. And so, I think that prior to those changes, there was a merit-based system in place. There was one standard on which everyone was judged. And if you were an African American and wanted to be a pilot, there was a path for you. You weren't excluded because of your race. And I wanted to talk about it within the context of what is sometimes called the Motte and Bailey fallacy, because I think that this is a lot of what's going on in the news right now. And this is just the kind of chat GPT definition on the Google AI. It says the Motte and Bailey fallacy is a type of argument that involves switching between two positions that are similar but not the same. The arguer will present a more controversial position, I would say, in public discourse, but when challenged, then they switch to a more modest position. And this makes it seem like the original position is still valid. The Motte is the more modest position that's easy to defend, and the Bailey is the more controversial position that is harder to defend. And this fallacy is named after a castle design of a Motte and Bailey, where the Motte is a high fortified structure, and that's the more modest position, and the Bailey is the small walled village underneath. Okay, so all right, let me let Kevin in here. Hey, man.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you. You're good.
Okay, good.
So I'm just wanted to talk a little bit and get you to weigh in on too. I think that a lot of the public conversation that's happening right now around DEI is the Motte and Bailey fallacy, where it's like we're told, for example, in the Motte again is the more modest position that
Yep.
everyone agrees on, and we all agree on this, and it's very easy to defend. And the Bailey is the more controversial position that is harder to defend, and often I think denied once you start kind of calling it out. And so when I see these claims of DEI is collapsing, that's a cover story for white supremacy. Well, we all agree that it's easy to agree, like, oh, I don't want to be for white supremacy.
Yep.
That's bad.
Yep.
And it often sounds in public like, ending segregation, that's DEI, or teaching Black history, or teaching about Ruby Bridges. We're getting rid of that. And that's white supremacy, and you don't want to be for that. And it's like, wait a minute, is that what DEI is? Is that what I'm against?
Yeah.
And then the Bailey, which is a more controversial position, is this kind of preferential treatment in hiring from that I just read in the lawsuit against the FAA. But when you hear people talk about it in public, they don't acknowledge the racial preferences.
Yep.
They just want to say, you're racist, you're for segregation, you're against Black history, you don't want to teach about truthful history about Ruby Bridges. But they don't want to talk about the more complicated and real position of what they're really arguing is preferential treatment in hiring and admissions. What do you think about that?
No, I think it's spot on. I think the Motte and Bailey um, applies perfectly here because I see it all the time. Um, they're arguing, no, we're just providing opportunities and looking in various places for a particular talent and just giving everyone an opportunity and being intentional about that. And it's like, okay, that doesn't sound bad, but that's not what they're doing.
Right.
What how it actually plays out is they have predetermined that the person they're going to hire is from a certain demographic, and that's what they go look for, and that's what they're hiring based on the demographic, um, because that's how a lot of these HR departments are being judged on how well they do from a DEI standpoint.
Mm,
So it's not that, oh, they went out and hired the best person or even the best fit. They went out and hired the best person and fit that fit the right identity category first, because that's what they're ultimately being judged by. And to say that they're not, that's the lie. you
yeah.
know, it is race based, not just race based, because it can be gender, sexuality, all these different intersectionality identity groups, however they want to label it. Um, and yeah, and that's what they're really hiring off of. And the qualifications come secondary. And like the pilot was talking about, when you don't, I'll give an example. With the Chips and Science Act, that was something that the Biden administration signed to say we need to start producing our own semiconductors here in the United States and not have to depend on Taiwan and the China thing. And so they did this thing called Chips and Science Act, and it was funding and money for companies to start building semiconductors in the United States. Well, what they did was they attached a lot of DEI criteria to these companies. They had to meet certain levels of, racial people in the company and all this type of stuff. Well, what they found was a lot of these companies couldn't get the money because they couldn't meet the DEI requirements because there weren't enough minorities in like these highly technical fields for them to to hire to get the money. They couldn't meet the quotas. So if you wanted to meet those quotas, what you're going to have to do is lower your standards of who you can hire and bring those people in just so you can meet the quota. And that's what happens a lot of times when the quota is the most important thing.
Yeah.
When diversity is the most important thing, you will lower your standards to fill those slots, instead of hiring the best people you can find, because it's more important to have the diversity.
Yeah. Elaine says that her friend thinks DEI is just basic access for disabilities or equal hiring. That's the MOT.
Yeah.
That's the position that we can all agree to.
Yes.
And
I
and
had a friend this week who said he liked DEI because his daughter is a diabetic, and he thought the idea of them being focusing on access and having things to where she could be a normal life and work, those are the things that excited him. And I was trying to explain to him that's not what DEI is.
that's not what it is.
It's not what it is. So it's well-meaning people are buying into this stuff because they're buying the lie and not really looking at, okay, how does this really play out
Yeah.
in real life versus the kind of picture they're trying to paint for us.
Yeah. And I think like the what you'll see a lot of times is this shell game with the Mott and the Bailey.
Yeah.
And what Trump is doing in the executive orders and what he's trying to reverse from the Obama administration with the FAA is saying, no, we're just going to have one standard on
Yes.
which everybody is judged. And sometimes we call this meritocracy, but it's that there's going to be one qualification test. If you're joining the military, there's one physical training test, that we're going to have an equal standard for all. And it's wide open, it's inclusive in that whosoever will may come, but there will be a pairing out of qualified candidates versus those who are not. But when we engage in the Mott and the Bailey on DEI, it becomes very confusing. And this is why you see progressives on television screaming about us going to apartheid and that we're going it's meritocracy is a dog whistle for white supremacy. And this is
Yeah.
why they're saying that.
Yeah.
Um
I think it's a losing strategy. I'm gonna be honest.
Mm,
My position has been, and I've seen it all over the internet, is we don't care. Like the screaming and the yelling and the name calling, no one cares anymore.
it
Nobody's
it
falling.
doesn't work
It
anymore.
doesn't work
The
anymore.
emotional blackmail
Nope, it doesn't
is
work.
not
Like, yep, racist, misogynist, transphobe. Yep, get whatever label you want to put on. I don't care. We're gonna do what needs to be done.
yeah.
You know,
So if we're gonna hire firefighters, we're gonna have one standard. You gotta be able to carry this
that
much
needs to
weight.
be the standard. You can't have.
Yeah,
I mean, you can't have a different standard for females versus males when it comes to being a firefighter. You got to be able to. You got to have a minimum standard that's across the board.
yeah.
You got to be able to carry 80 pounds or 100 pounds, whatever it is,
Down a
um,
ladder or
down a
whatever that
ladder.
is. Yeah,
Whatever that is. And this, Pete Hexelf with the military and special operations and combat units. It's got to be one standard. You can't have. Put like this: the double standard is true to the fact that there are physiological differences between men and women. At least they agree with that. You know, but even with that being said, you can't lower the standards needed to do the job because men and women are physically different. You
yeah,
know, just because you want women in the job, that's not how it works.
yeah. Plus, another issue is where are we going to get all these black people, Kevin?
Oh,
Like
that's
if every
that.
company has a quota of like we got to have 25% black people, where are we getting all these people? Because there's only 7% of you who are of working age. If you're a
Yes,
black man, it's or even a black adult, like some percentage. There's only 13% of African Americans. Half
yes,
of those are children,
yes.
and so where are we getting all these people?
That is my biggest thing. I scream all the time because even with the black community, I have to tell them, y'all talk like we're 50% of the population. you know, that's how and it's almost like there's only black and white people in the country. There's
I
no
know,
one else. It's just
right?
blacks and whites.
Because
Um,
that's all the conversation is just on
that's
the
all the
binary of that.
conversation is,
Yeah,
yes. And it's like we are such a small minority, but yet we're claiming to want so much representation across every spectrum of society. And it's just not possible. Not only is it not possible from a number standpoint, and then this is my whole argument and Thomas Sowell's argument and anyone with common sense argument. Culture produces outcomes, right? Black culture does not produce a lot of people in STEM, right? It just doesn't because we don't value math and science as we're growing up across a wide spectrum. We rather play basketball or we rather go do whatever, while Asians are studying math and science, out the womb. And so it's like one of those things of you can't have all this representation across every spectrum of society. This idea
right,
of representation and all it's only used, and this is my thing too, it's only used to criticize majority white spaces. No one is screaming at HBCUs for not being diverse enough. No one is telling the black church that they need to be reaching out and becoming more diverse and looking like all of America or looking like Revelation 7. No one is using that type of guilt trip on anyone else other than the white community. And so once you realize that's what they're using it for, you got to stop letting them affect you and stop acting like these are legitimate, serious concerns or arguments and just realize that they're just using these tools to emotionally manipulate people to go along with certain things. And I'm gonna
yeah,
be honest, black people, this is where off code comes in. You're not supposed to tell the game. We do those things to get ahead because we know there's a power in the race card. There's power in being black in America in our history that we can use to get prominence in certain positions of power. Um, and yeah, people use it because they know white people, especially liberal white people, are really scared to be called a name. And so and well-meaning. I mean, let's look in the church. Christians are by far just good people. And when you take someone who's good-hearted and stuff, and you start putting this guilt on them, it weighs on people, in ways that, and then the person who is, the black person, the minority who's then laying this guilt on everyone is the one now benefiting. They're the ones that now has a voice and given power within the institution. They're the ones who now have a book deal and a prominent speaking engagements because they're lifting black voices and all this kind of stuff. It's just self-promotion. That's all it is,
yeah.
you know.
Well,
So,
speaking of the church, I want to have you react to this clip that I saw today on Woke Preacher Clips
oh my goodness.
about DEI in the church.
Let's
And
go.
The different metals represent the strength of the different kingdoms, so that the gold kingdom would be the best one and each one would be inferior to it. And what God is telling Daniel is that Babylon, the head of gold, would be the most powerful nation in this succession. So then the question should be, what would make Babylon so great? I'm glad you asked. You just read it there in Daniel chapter 1. Do you realize that for all of Nebuchadnezzar's eccentricities, he had one good civil practice? What made Babylon stand out was they instituted a diversity, equity, and inclusion program. Okay. Y'all too slow with me today. Did you notice it was there in Daniel chapter 1? So that what Babylon did was every captured nation, they would take individuals from that group and they would train them in the science and literature of Babylon and put them to work in the king's service. And some believe that Nebuchadnezzar learned from his father Nabopolassar that any kingdom that has a homogeneous cabinet is going to have a lid in its prosperity. In other words, Nebuchadnezzar knew that if your cabinet is homogeneous, if your military looks the same, if all of those in leadership think the same, guess what? Your blind spots are going to be permanent. And the only way to get a 360-degree view of wisdom is to have people from every nation represented in the leadership of government. In other words, Nebuchadnezzar recognized that there would be some that had gifts in military, that there would be some that had strength in agriculture, that some would have strength in the arts, that others would have strength in sciences. And Nebuchadnezzar knew that it did not diminish him in order to include them, but it actually bolstered him in order to include them, because the more gifts you have at the table, the more wisdom you're going to have.
Is anybody going to tell him? I don't know. Somebody.
Did you see the name of the sermon? Was I'm a DEI hire?
Yes. Yes.
So here's Daniel. He's got some DEI in the book of Daniel. And but see, this to me is the Motte and the Bailey. He's talking about just, expanding our talent pool and hiring qualified people with different giftings. And but that's not what we're talking about. That's not DEI. That's just good hiring. I'm hiring people that have the giftings that I need. I need a diverse array of skills. I'm hiring those people.
Yeah. First of all, that is the prime example of what is wrong with the Black church. That type of preaching, it had nothing to do with the scripture, right? It's just taking the Bible and using it for political purposes. That's all that is. It is a shell. They're a front company for the Democrat Party. That's all it is. Second of all, that's not what Nebuchadnezzar is doing there. Anybody who knows anything about empire building, when you conquer a people, it is best to bring them into your fold and make them part of you so you don't have to fight them anymore. It's making everyone Babylonians, right?
Colonization. We call that colonization.
It's colonization. And all of that is assimilation.
That's right.
So
you're going to be our culture now. You're going to have our religion now. You're going to use our language now.
Yes. That's what that is. You're making one people. It's not about distinctions and diversity. And no, of course, you're going to take people with talents that you conquer an army, you realize, man, they got some really great fighters. I'm going to bring those fighters into my army, of course. But the whole point of what they were doing was to make an empire, to make everyone Babylonians, and to buy into the idea that you were a Babylonian. So you were assimilated. You took on a new identity, like things that they would not be against. But like this, Nebuchadnezzar was not for multiculturalism.
You will obey today.
This idea that he would try to take what they were doing in Babylon and try to compare it to DEI is just woefully ignorant.
It is the most superficial reading of the text. I feel like you made this up in 5 minutes. It's not the result of sustained study. This is you taking your 21st century view and reading it back on the text and trying to make the text say something you want it to say.
Yeah.
And it at the same time, it's also the Motte and the Bailey of diversity, to try to get your people to think, oh my word, the world's against us and it's white supremacy, and I got to keep the grievances going.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just hilarious that he would try to take that approach, because that's just clearly not what was happening back then. It's just I saw that earlier, and it infuriated me, because I listen to people that are there to amening it and buying into it. But yeah, it is just a poor example of the way to use God's word, So yeah.
If you were his elder an elder in his church, you'd be probably having a side conversation with him.
Oh yeah, he would have had to sit down. Probably mid-sermon. Probably once I saw the title come up there, he probably would have had to sit down. We would have just sung hymns and went home, because it wouldn't have been a sermon.
We're not doing this. Well, let's change the subject a little here. USAID is collapsing.
It is.
And most Americans have never heard of USAID, and they think it's a humanitarian organization.
Mm-hmm.
Not so much.
Nope. Nope.
And I'm seeing a lot of activity on Twitter from people in other countries in the third world that have received USAID money, and talking about how it is really just sort of a Trojan horse to bring in a lot of queer theory and queer practices into the third world countries, but they feel like, well, we can't get the money if we don't go along with this.
Yep.
And I have to tell you, I'm not too sad about this collapsing. This just seems like we're doing a lot of really not good stuff.
Yeah.
Like spending millions of dollars for condoms for Gaza, or sponsoring musicals on queer things. I don't know what we're doing.
And it's funny. I mean, you're saying USAID, but that's not how most of us didn't know it. Most people thought it was USAID. This is a charity. This is where we give aid around the world to help out third world countries. That's what we thought this was. And turns out, no, it is just a front company to fund various projects that various entities of the government want to see spread throughout the world, or in some cases even used to overthrow governments or create an uprising, and funded by the CIA and all of this. It's pretty much a slush fund for any kind of thing you want to do. It's not about giving, food to starving kids in third world countries, which people thought it was. No,
or even if it is, there's so many strings attached to it that it's about control.
Yes.
It's about bringing, a lot of times it seems to be kind of a money laundering scheme for 100%. The CIA.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to say like this, as someone who worked in the intelligence field.
Okay, help me.
Not saying that the things they did were great, but there has to be a way to hide money under other things. You can't earmark things CIA because other countries are going to know what you're doing. And so it has to be a way to hide money within various pots. That's why I'm not surprised when they say, oh, the Pentagon can't pass an audit, because there's money you don't want everything tracked, right? because if you're tracking it, your enemy's tracking it. They know where things are going. We have secrets, y'all. The American public can't be in on everything, because if the American public knows, our enemies know. And so I'm not surprised that the CIA was using these funds to do different things. But what we can judge is whether those things were like really good for the United States.
Yeah.
I'm all for, U.S. power and our benefit and U.S. interest being promoted throughout the world. But some of this stuff is it's more just left-wing progressive ideology being pushed to other countries.
Yeah. It's starting to come out now. Here's one Twitter post regarding USAID. I don't think American Christians realize how perverse our international influence has become. The pastor of the largest church in Chile spoke at Lake Point in Espanol last year. He explained that despite having a deeply traditional view of gender and family, they had begun aggressively teaching LGBT ideology in Chilean public schools, to the horror of the Chilean parents. Why? Because Chile feared losing USAID if they did it.
Wow.
And then someone chimed in, also happening in Ethiopia, Kenya, Tanzania. And this is exactly what Monique saw on her trip last year to Africa. When she started looking into this, she's like, this money is just everywhere, and it's bringing queer theory and abortion.
Yep.
Two things that totally go against the global South and their value system, which is still fairly traditional and keeping in traditional thought of consistent with the Christian worldview, broadly speaking. And this is not good. This is not good.
And I want to take some shots, because when I see this, I want to look at the Evangelicals for Harris people. Ooh. I want to look at the Russell Moores, the David.
Where's those receipts?
Yeah, why are y'all quiet now? Where are you? Trump was the great evil and the great Satan. No, you were funding behind the great Satan. It was so self-righteous.
I would love to see that money of who is behind Evangelicals for Harris or Christians for Harris. That was the real progressive version of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And don't get us started on Megan's book, Shepherds for Sale.
Well, people were up in arms about it, but it's turning out that a lot of the things that she said about immigration and the immigration chapter and the funding are turning out to be true.
Imagine that. All these conspiracy theories keep coming true, y'all. That's all. That's the only thing I know. I'm just going to start reading conspiracy theories and know what's true. But no, those is kind of what I said with the race stuff. Everybody went in all BLM, and then when BLM was turned to be fraudulent, they were all silent. No one has apologized. No one has said, I was wrong, I'm sorry. Same thing here. They're just going to be silent and move on. They're not going to say, I was wrong. What's really happening right now is a really good thing. What is happening now and Trump winning is more if you are a Christian, you should be more happy now than you would be, or than you were when Biden was in office or Kamala had won. And I'm just going to be honest, because pushing the rainbow stuff is so much of what they were doing and so much what they were about. Obama was the rainbow president. He's the one who got, gay marriage passed through the Supreme Court. And then the next day he lit the rainbow, the White House up in rainbow colors, and then had the nerve the next day to attend a church and sing Amazing Grace. That's the stuff these people who are supposed to be like the Russell Moores of the world are supporting. And we don't even have to get on the abortion stuff. And I don't get what these Christians are thinking. I get you don't like Trump. I'm not a Trump fan in terms but
you're not a blind follower.
No. Yeah. But I can see that the left and the progressive left and the Democrat Party are just evil.
Yeah.
like their agenda is evil. right? And so I don't care how nice they come off to in your face, their agenda is anti-Christ,
Well, what
right?
I want to see is more like, as we're seeing USAID being exposed,
Mm-hmm.
I want to see more of that over in the evangelical side. Like, I really want to know. I have questions.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, here is just one example of Be the Bridge. I don't know if people
Mm.
remember Be the Bridge, but
One of the
back in
worst books ever written.
2020,
Yep.
everybody was doing Be the Bridge groups and trying to get rid of their white guilt. And according to the public records, they took $786,000 in contributions, okay? But they had $165,000 in a government grant.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of money. Monique and I could do a lot with that. But here's the thing, is that we don't take government grants at the Center for Biblical Unity. And we are constantly encouraging Christian charities and institutions not to take government money, because if something were to happen and it goes away, or they make you start compromising on what you're teaching, they're only going to give you money. They're not giving money to the Center for Biblical Unity. They give
No.
money to institutions that they feel like align with their progressive ideas.
Yes.
They're not going to be giving it to people like us or Alton Hardy or the Orange County Rescue Mission. They're not doing
No.
that.
No.
They're giving it to their perceived allies within the evangelical community.
Yeah.
And we are constantly beating this drum when we're on conversations with Christian institutions. Please do not take government money. And you never know when it's going to go away, because now some institutions, let's say that there's a handful of institutions that are legitimate, doing legitimate humanitarian work, that were getting USAID money. Well, now they're going to have to quickly try to raise private funds to make up for that shortfall, because they've become so dependent on the government money.
Yep.
And I have to tell you, Monique may see this differently, but I'm a little short on empathy for those types of situations. So I don't know. What is your
Yeah.
take?
I think we need to talk about these NGOs who
Mm.
are making a lot of money off of these crises, and a lot of these, it's like that documentary, it was on Netflix, called Poverty Inc. And it exposed the poverty industry and talking about how much money they were getting in these federal grants and things like that. And the question was being asked is, what's their incentive to actually solve any problem, to actually end poverty? They're making so much money off of it, right? I think we have to look at a lot of these organizations, even ones we think that are good organizations that are taking and making so much money off of these things. What is the incentive to really solve the problem? Because if you solve the problem, where's your funding go? Where's your money go? You got people who are getting a paycheck off of this. And so it does bring into question the incentive and the motives of those involved when there's so much money flowing in, especially from the government. And so a lot of these, these NGOs, if you're making so much money off of housing immigrants and all of this type of stuff, do you really want the immigration problem to go away? You're making money off of it. And so it's things like that we have to talk about, and just stop taking things at face value. Stop being thrown off by nice words and nice gestures like Jesus was an immigrant, and
There's
because
another Motte and Bailey for you.
yeah, because those things are just meant to make you not think and pull at your heartstrings and to guilt you, instead of thinking critically about, okay, what are we really doing and what are we really talking about?
Yeah.
And you can say what you want to say about Elon Musk, but for someone to go in and look at itemized things, going like, why are we paying for this? Why are we doing this? This doesn't make any sense. How does this benefit the American people? You know, that that's what we need, and it's not racist, misogynistic, or fascist to do that. I mean, they're throwing out every word they can throw out to try to discredit,
Oh yeah.
you know. I'm like,
I
hold
don't,
up.
as a taxpayer, I'm like, okay, I knew the government was corrupt, but I never would have guessed we were spending millions on condoms to Gaza. Like
$50 million.
I wasn't aware. That hadn't entered my mind that that's what we were doing.
No, like it, and that just put like this. Why would you send condoms to a people you claim are going through a genocide? That don't sound like that's the thing to do, right? If you
Yeah.
claim there's a genocide happening, why are you also trying to give them condoms to stop them from reproducing?
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. It's
Well,
all lies.
here's another one that's part of the evangelical industrial complex is Christianity Today.
Absolutely.
They received almost $2 million in
Wow.
government grants.
Wow. Do you know the period of time? Was that just in 1 year?
My guess is that this is from their 990, and it is probably the last time they filed it. So it's 2023. Yeah.
Okay.
You're only required to
Wow.
file like every 2 or 3 years or something.
Wow, that's a
But
lot of money from
that's a
the
lot.
why is a Christian publication getting that much funding from the government?
I have questions. And recently, Megan Basham, I think last week, posted she got some receipts that they recently just got a huge grant. I think it was 2 million from the Lilly Foundation.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of questions about where the Lilly Foundation gets their money.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's peculiar. Here's one more just to throw out there. And again, this is from the Data Republican receipts, but it's related to oh, rats. It didn't work. Let me try again. Because this one's related to Russell Moore's curriculum that they did the after party curriculum. I don't know if
Yeah,
you've heard of
yeah.
that.
I have.
And a lot of churches, and there was a lot of like people saying, when Megan came out and said, this is being funded in part by there's some progressive money behind this. Well, apparently she was right. It came through, one of the funds came through USAID
Wow.
via the Rockefeller Foundation.
For people that don't know,
Um,
the Rockefeller Foundation is very liberal and progressive.
yeah. So 300,000 came through the Rockefeller Foundation, and that was funded by USAID. And also Bill Kristol's Defending Democracy Foundation, which is also funded by USAID. And so the after party was getting some of this USAID money. You have to ask the question, what is it about that curriculum that people who are progressive would want to help fund it?
Yeah, and that makes so much sense because I follow Bill Kristol on Twitter. Well, at least he shows up in my For You section a lot. And I remember when I used to like him because he used to be on Fox News. He was conservative
Yeah,
during the
I
Bush
remember that.
administration.
Yeah.
He is a full blown, basically Democrat now. Like
Yeah.
he espouse every Democrat position. He does nothing but bash the right. And I just asked him on Twitter. He didn't respond. But I was like, "What happened to you? Like I don't even recognize the person anymore." But it makes sense if you're being funded by these organizations that are just giving you money like this to now use your voice to try to push their causes and their agenda because he's completely flipped, you know. And now it makes sense. It's follow the money.
Yeah.
Man.
So I have questions about the evangelical industrial complex.
Yeah,
I
we
I
should.
want somebody to provide more public exposure about where some of these institutions are getting their money because you know we had we were recently, I think it was last week, we were looking at a service called Charity Navigator. And this is a place where people can go to vet charities and decide where they want their dollars to go. And so we were thinking about, oh, we should probably claim our ID on there and set up an account, blah, blah, blah. Well, you can't get a very good rating if you don't have DEI.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's rigged.
It's like the social credit score. It's like the ESG stuff.
Exactly. So if we were to go through, it's better for us to not have a presence on Charity Navigator, because if we were to have a presence on there, our score would be very low because we don't participate in the DEI charade and we don't get government money. And so rather than having 2 stars on Charity Navigator, Monique and I just decided we're not going to claim our presence on there. Like, if people want to see, what we're up to financially, they can ask us. All donors have the right to ask us, to see our 990 is public. And, but I want to see more receipts, because there's a lot of charities on there. And if you're seeing one on Charity Navigator that has like 4 stars or 5 stars, whatever it is, that means they have a DEI program, and that you don't know that. It all sounds so good. Oh, it's a charity.
It does.
USAID, like these are pretty words, but you have to dig a little deeper.
Yeah. I think when it comes to Christian nonprofits, if you're not funded by just Christians in general, crowdsourcing, volunteers, or churches and denominations, we need to question where your money's coming from.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're not being funded by the church and other Christians, then that's a problem. Like a secular organization like the Rockefeller charity, that government grants, those things are questionable because they come with demands. Or why are they funding you? Be the Bridge is right in line with all the secular racial ideology stuff. And so they funded that because they want to push that to evangelicals. And it's like people don't think that far and understand that there are other elements and other powers out there who want to influence God's people. And so you need to ask, why is this organization that is not Christian willing to give you so much money?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I have questions. I wish that I knew how to get some of those receipts. I don't have the foggiest idea how to do that research, but boy, there's some institutions I would love to.
Might need to call Megan. I'm sure Megan could use some starting points on where to start digging.
Well, thanks for hopping on here with me, Kevin. It was a lot more fun doing it this way. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. I couldn't leave you hanging.
Yeah, that was good. All right, friends, we will see you next week. And I know that Monique and Kevin are going to have a new Off Code episode dropping soon, sort of a follow-up to the Chad Jackson conversation and MLK. Do you want to maybe give people a little teaser about some of the feedback you've received about the interview with Chad Jackson?
Oh yeah, I mean, a lot of the feedback was good. Some of it was not, and which we expected to take a lot of heat from that. But shortly after we did that video, the MLK files and stuff about his past kind of really got in the news, and so we really thought we needed to follow up on the conversation we had with Chad to just really talk about who MLK was and just some of the beliefs and idols we've created and hold on to. So
that's good.
Yeah.
We'll look forward to that. All right, friends, we will see you next week, God willing. Thanks for tuning in. Share this with a friend, or as Monique would say, share it with an enemy.